Hey everybody, welcome back to another tech video. And if you've watched any of my recent videos, you'll know that one of the things that I really focused on was the idea that if you're going to be buying a product, especially one that costs a decent chunk of change, you want to make sure that it fits your needs as perfectly as possible, because everything has something that it's good at and something it's not so good at. And today, I was sent a product that is a perfect example of that, and one of the first times I've actually experienced this, because I tend to follow the rule of getting something that fits my needs as perfectly as possible to a T. So today, we're going to talk about the To Be Number One 10-in-1 driver-based USB docking station. So let's get started. Actually, before we get started, I do want to say this was sent to me by the company. I did make it very clear that this was going to be an honest review if the opening wasn't already obvious enough that this will be very honest, but they were okay with that, and this was it. There was no money exchange. I just got the product, and they wanted me to talk about it. So with that out of the way, now we can get started. So first off, with the hardware itself, this thing is actually really nice. Like, just physically, it is really cool. It's all aluminum, which I was very impressed by. For some reason, in the pictures online, I thought it was plastic, but no, this is all aluminum except for the plastic on the ends where they slide the guts in. It's got a ton of ports. You've got 3 USB 3.1 Gen 1 ports, or whatever USB standard it's called now. You have 4 different display connectors grouped into sections of 2. You have 2 HDMI and 2 DisplayPort, and you can run up to 2 4K 60Hz displays off of this, which is really impressive, especially when I talk more about how this works in a minute. So that's just really cool. On the end of the docking station, you have a gigabit Ethernet port, but full disclosure, most of the testing I did was on my Mac Studio, which already has 10 gig Ethernet, so I really didn't test this as much, though I did try it out on things like my iPad, and when I sent it off for one of my buddies to test it out on a laptop, it worked fantastically. So that's really all I got to say about that. Gigabit Ethernet, if you don't have it on your device, you can add it, and it works great. Now on the other side of the hub, where this really nice braided USB-C cable runs in, you have an audio jack, which, again, just like the gigabit Ethernet, if you don't have an audio jack on your device, you can add one, and it's really nice. And because they are marketing this as a docking station, it was kind of an expected thing to have on here, but it is nice. And funnily enough, when I tested it on some of my older computers, it might have been a placebo effect, but it did seem to sound better. I don't know if it's because the port on my older computers was just more worn out and this is new or what, but it works well. It's nothing special. You're not going to be running high impedance headphones like my DT770s off of it, but it is perfectly fine for average headphones on something like an iPad. And the 10th port on here, because it's a 10-in-1, is the power delivery port, which looks like USB-C, but is only USB-C in visuals. I'm always kind of bummed out when I see this on a device. I get it, especially with 3 different USB ports on here. You're probably running up on the limits of bandwidth by having USB plus display, but I always like a USB hub that gives you back your USB-C connection, and unfortunately this doesn't do that. It is just there for power delivery, but if you're gonna just do power delivery, this is the way to do it, because you can plug up to a 100-watt power source into this USB-C port, and then it will output at 85 watts. And since I only really had an iPad to test, I couldn't do like a full power test. But when I sent it off to my buddy who uses a laptop constantly, he said it was more than enough to continually use his device with something heavy like video editing, and it didn't deplete the battery. In fact, it charged it like any other plug would. So that's a plus. Again, still wish that it was something like a full USB-C port, but if you're gonna do power delivery, I guess 85 watts going to your laptop off a 100-watt power brick isn't the worst way to do it. Now, as I said, I sent this off to a friend to use for laptop use, and then I actually tested it out with my desktop as well as a few other random devices, and here's how that went. So my workflow revolves almost entirely around the Mac Studio. I don't have a portable Mac that's been made in the last 10 years. They're all old collector's items at this point, and if I do need to do something on the go, I bring my iPad Pro, because with the tools I have on here, it is actually capable to get by with just my iPad Pro on the go in a pinch. So when I went to test this on my Mac Studio, a few things became very clear. Number one, having a bunch of USB-C ports on the back of the Mac Studio is awesome, and this just sits there perfectly, and it does get warm during operation, which is suddenly a realization to me of why they probably wrapped it in aluminum and gave it these fins, because it actually functions for cooling. I don't know why I didn't think of that during my testing, but that makes total sense. But the other realization I had is that the driver-based name only refers to the display connection. So when you plug this into any computer, it will identify the USB hub, it will also identify the Ethernet port and the headphone jack, and it did also identify power delivery, though I feel like that's just because it's sending power through. I don't know if it needs drivers to regulate it properly, but I did charge my iPad from 0 to full using it, and it was fine. Also, if you're plugging it into something with a standard USB plug, you actually get this incredibly overbuilt USB-A to USB-C adapter. This thing is actually metal, which I was really surprised by. So you have obviously the metal of the USB-A port and a little bit of plastic on the end, but the actual centerpiece here is metal. I was kind of surprised by that, and that meant that I was able to plug it into my older Macs that only had USB-A, as well as the front plug on my gaming desktop. And if you have a USB, well, any type of USB at this point, it'll work just fine, except for USB Type-B, but I don't know of many things that use Type-B anymore. But yeah, either way, it was really nice to find out that the only things that needed drivers were the displays, because that meant that I could plug this into my iPad or hang it off the front of my desktop or plug it into some older Macs and get 3 USB ports, the Ethernet jack, power delivery for some of them, and the audio jack. But if you want to run the displays, you do need to download a piece of software called DisplayLink Manager. And this is, like I said, where things got a little weird on the desktop side of things. So for my testing, I downloaded the software, and once it was downloaded, I plugged this into the Mac Studio. I hooked up both my displays to it instead of the Thunderbolt adapter that I normally use, and both displays showed up. It identified the full resolution, they scaled properly, I had no issues. Then my computer had to run an update. Now, normally when you run an update, you just reboot, you come back into the computer, you're ready to roll. But because of the way mine's set up, I do have to put a password in on boot up, which is not a big deal. It comes up on the display, you type in the password, and boom, you're booted up. But when you're rebooting, the software that runs these display connectors isn't running. And because of that, the displays don't turn on. So I spent, like, no lie, probably 10 minutes sitting in front of my screen wondering if the update had just failed and my computer was having like a moment. But then I realized, no, the light's on, and when I type, I can hear it making the error noise, and I could hear it doing that, so I wasn't sure why it wasn't showing. So just to kind of narrow down what I was doing, I unplugged one of the connectors and plugged it directly into the Mac, and lo and behold, it came right up. So it makes sense, and I don't know why I didn't think about this, but if you're running this on a desktop, you can't have both of your displays run into this. Otherwise, if the software is not running, your computer's just not going to give you a screen until you're logged in. Doesn't work. Another kind of weird thing I ran into was that for some reason, DisplayLink Manager makes my Mac think that it's connected to a projector, which disables certain features like unlock with Apple Watch, which I use constantly. And that was just another really weird thing. And even when I plugged in one of my displays directly to the computer, it still acted like it was hooked to a projector, and so I couldn't actually unlock it with my Apple Watch. I had to either use Touch ID or my password. Now, like, that's not the end of the world or anything. That's a very niche scenario that pretty much only Apple users are gonna run into, but the whole not being able to see your display on boot up and having to guess when to put your password in so it logs in and starts the software thing, that's something that both Mac and Windows users are going to experience on the desktop, because it's almost like this thing really benefits from being plugged into a device that has a built-in display so that you can do all those things, then use it. Almost like a laptop. Now, something that ToBeNumber1 did want me to mention, even though it was not something I experienced in my testing, was the fact that you can exceed the 1 monitor limit that you originally had on the M1 chips, specifically with the laptops. Again, I didn't personally experience this because I was using a desktop, but if you do have an M1 laptop and have the need to plug in more than 1 monitor, you can do that with this device. So yeah, for my workflow, which is very much a stationary workflow, this is not a great fit. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are certain things that are amazing to me. The fact that you can use just a standard USB connection, even down to USB-A, and run 2 displays, only 2, but that's still impressive through USB. That's awesome. I love the fact that you can actually pick which kind of connector you want, whether it be DisplayPort or HDMI. You can pick one of them out of each group, either one HDMI and one DisplayPort, mix and match, whatever you want. That's awesome, but because it's driver-based, you almost always have to have another display connected to get the driver started initially. So that was my experience. Then I let one of my friends try it out for about 3 days with their laptop, because they are a much heavier laptop user. And when I let them use it, they had an entirely different experience from me. So yeah, Tubi number one, sorry this video did take a little longer than expected. The last portion of this was trying to get my hands on a USB-C laptop. I couldn't, so I sent it off to a friend and they used it for a couple days to see how they liked it, and they loved it. Freaking great. They were blown away by how easy it was to use. And again, it was a very different experience from me. One of the things he mentioned during testing was that once he turned on the startup at login function for the Display Link Manager tool, he never had to think about whether or not he could just plug this in and have a display running because, well, he just logged in like he normally did on his laptop and everything worked. After he got it back and I realized that his experience with it was entirely different from mine, this was where I kind of reverted back to what I've been talking about for the past few weeks with other videos, which is that this is one of those products where it excels at what it was engineered for. And for the things that the engineers probably didn't think about too much, it's not that great. This is a fantastic piece of hardware for somebody who needs a variety of ports on the go. And it shows. It has a ton of connections, it's lightweight, it's built super well to the point where I'd be more concerned about what's in the backpack with this than it getting damaged in the backpack. All of this just screams portability, all the way down to the really well braided cable, the metal end, the, again, metal build, all of it screams portability. And so I personally didn't have a great use case for it. And because I didn't have a great use case for it, it didn't fit my needs. But if you're a laptop user, either USB-A or USB-C, that's the beauty. I love having these little things. They're so nice. But if you're a laptop user, USB-A or USB-C, and you want to be able to connect more displays, and you want to be able to have more USB-A ports, maybe charge your laptop if it's USB-C, gigabit Ethernet if you've got an ultralight without Ethernet, and an audio jack, this thing is fantastic. If you're a desktop user like me, maybe look around a little bit. And that's really the story of this review. This thing was marketed as a docking station, and what do you dock? A laptop. I can't think of anybody who's docking a desktop. And so if you're docking a laptop, this is fantastic. If you're docking a desktop, I think you're doing it wrong. If you guys are interested in checking out the Tubi number one 10-in-1 docking station, you can check out the link down below. It's $109.99. I realized I forgot to mention the price earlier, so I'm mentioning it now. It is $109.99 for an incredibly well-built, portable docking station that is fantastic for the laptop user on the go. Thank you so much for Tubi number one for sending this my way. I had a great time testing it. It's the first time that I've had a product where I've had two totally different experiences from one person to another. Super great learning experience. And honestly, this thing is still going in my bag for the driverless functions I can use it for with my iPad. Thanks again for you guys sending it out. And apart from that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to check out every link down in the description. Tubi number one's down there. We got a bunch of other stuff. Make sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment. I sell merch as well. You can check it out over on Teesprings. If you guys didn't like the video, leave a comment. You can dislike it, but make sure to leave a comment so I know what to do better next time. And aside from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there and have a good one.